Hello everyone. In this lecture, we're going to be covering the content in Erfurt's text, Orientation to the Counseling Profession, in Chapter 2. In this particular chapter, we'll talk about professional counseling organizations, the purpose and positive effects of licensure and certification, as well as accreditation. And in these conversations, I'll tell you sort of where we are in the process of these areas at UTPB. Almost every agency and type of work out there has a professional organization. It's not any different for counseling. For professional counseling organizations, they're created because the lives of professional counselors and the clients they serve would be quite different if a professional organization didn't exist. For example, there would not be any licensure, no expectations for ethical practice and work with clients, and no third-party reimbursement from health insurances to pay for clients who come to work with you. At one time, before organizations and a clear identity of what the counseling profession was, anyone could call themselves a counselor. You could simply identify and such and be thought that that's what you are because you said you were. This changed with the organizations because they began to suggest and provide standards of what you must actually be able to show knowledge of and the skills to do at not just a state, but a national standard to say only these people who can do A, B, and C, or D can be called counselors. Because of this, we got a stronger sense of who we are as a profession, not only across our states, but now the nation. And it also told outside people who we are, what we should do, what we're able to do that not any other profession can do, etc. One of the hugest national organization for us is the American Counseling Association, and you'll hear us refer to ACA quite often in the program. ACA speaks to and for professional counselors across settings and across specialties. This particular agency supports and speaks for licensed professional counselors, for professional school counselors, rehabilitation counselors, addictions counselors, art therapists, etc. They're all there. It is the world's largest organization for counselors with over 56,000 members currently in the United States and 50 other countries that are also part of ACA and have adopted their requirements and beliefs. The history of this particular organization is that it was founded in 1952 as the American Personnel and Guidance Association. It had 4 different divisions, but a lot of them were in terms of the guidance work of helping guide people to their place in the world. It had that kind of vocational bent back then. It changed its name in 1983 to the American Association for Counseling and Development. And then again in 1992, which has been in my lifetime and maybe some of y'all's, I don't know, all of y'all's, to its name, which it still uses today, which is the American Counseling Association. You're going to find in your text that there are 20 divisions that fall under ACA, which allows professional counselors and students to focus on a specific area of interest. Each division will elect its own division officers who preside over independent activities and represents an active voice in actual ACA governance. So we will have a president, if you will, over ACA completely, but at the table will be the person who is in charge of all of these divisions, ensuring that their group, their specialty, their division of choice is being heard. Divisions are sometimes categorized as belonging to either the passion division or the working divisions. So passion divisions focus on areas of expertise and topics of interest. I remember what it felt like to be in my counseling program back in the day, and they didn't have all of these divisions at that time. But I remember finding the ones that were so cool, that really spoke to me as an individual and spoke to the counselor that I really wanted to be. What eventually happened is I began to work in the work setting divisions, where there are work setting divisions that focus on various specialties and specific work settings. I had about 5 different types of divisions that I first joined when I got out of school. What ended up happening as I got into my work, finished my degree, got into my work as a counselor educator, I found that what I needed more were sometimes those divisions that I hadn't thought that I wanted before. And because I got into my work so specifically being a counselor educator and the work that I provide, then I started to join the divisions or stay in the divisions that were going to help me in my work with students and my students with clients. So I really focused on those. And then eventually, I at that particular time, I remember adding those and it being so beneficial. But what happened was I had so many of them, couldn't read all of them, that I kind of had to pick and choose what even financially I was going to kind of focus in on so that I could look more in depth at a specialty rather at in breadth. That doesn't mean every once in a while that I don't go pull the information from other divisions to read, because it makes me a better educator for counselors. It makes me a well-rounded counselor by myself, for myself as a person, and then also helps make sure that I'm giving my students the most relevant and impactful information that's been covered in all of these divisions. So if we look at those interest or passion-driven divisions, you'll see those ones that, some people are all about assessment and research and counseling. For those people who want to be devoted to child and adolescent counseling, whether it's either because they work in the schools or they have decided in their practice to focus on working with children. Humanistic counseling for those people who truly believe in the whole person-centered idea that Rogers began in that paradigm of theories. People who are focused in and want to work with the ALGBTIC type committees. There's the multicultural counseling and development divisions, the divisions for people who conduct lots of groups, believe in group, spiritual, ethical, and religious values in counseling. And so that you know, and also the social justice. Let's move towards the work setting divisions. Our college counseling, mental health, rehabilitation, school counselor, counselor education and supervision. I belong to that one. International Association of Addiction and Offender Counseling, marriage and family, government counseling, career. So these are often areas of specialities that you can get. So if you go back and forth for which ones you use or which you don't, some of them just may really be your passion, which ends up being some of the work that you talk about, as well as the divisions for where you work, that it can make sure that you know the information that you know that is beneficial to your particular work setting. I remember that I was part of a lot of those divisions, and just because I needed to have the information, I started to pare down to the point where I'm literally part of 2 different, one passion and one work setting division. And it's wonderful because when I get those magazines, when I get information about conferences, I can concentrate specifically on those 2 areas and not feel so lost about where I actually belong at this particular moment. That doesn't mean that I have to be closed off to any type of conference or information that's out there. I have just sort of turned into what I need at this particular point. Besides just the national organization and then the divisions within it, we also have ACA regions. And the 4 ACA regions are Midwest, North Atlantic, Southern, and Western. The 4 regions designations allow ACA members who are not members of ACA divisions to have representation through an ACA governing council. So what ends up happening is these regions or the ACA regions, even if you can't have a voice at the national level, there are often things that are happening regionally in the South versus the North, etc., that can be different, and we have to make sure that our needs and our clients' needs are being met in our area. Even further are the branches that fall within the regions. So if you look across, each region is composed of branches or states, as well as other U.S. and European territories. These branches represent the grassroots of counseling. The branches play a vital role in advocating for state legislation that is in the best interest of counselors' clients and in the public in those areas. As we're part of the southern region, you see that this region covers Alabama, Arkansas, Florida, Georgia, Kentucky, some areas of Latin America, Louisiana, Maryland, Mississippi, North Carolina, South Carolina, Tennessee and Texas, Virginia, and West Virginia. When you even go down further, let me go back here. Every single one of those areas, like Texas, like Tennessee, and every single one of the states within the southern region has their own state counseling association. So not only are we part of the southern region and then the national, we have what we call as Texas Counseling Association. And Texas Counseling Association provides a conference as well every year. And it's not an expensive conference, so that's one of the reasons I like to go. Another reason is I present at those conferences specifically because it deals with people who are working as counselors in the profession or who are teaching in Texas. There are laws that change at the state level that we have to be aware of, and we can't rely on ACA at the nation or the national level to tell us what's happening in our state. So I love the opportunity to go to ACA and the national type conferences. Mostly I go to the ACES one, which is the Association for Counselor Educators and Supervision, to see what is happening to us as a profession at the national level, but then also come to the Texas Counseling Association so that I can kind of come and speak and hear and learn, as well as teach people who are working specifically in the state of Texas so that they're aware of changes that are happening at the national and state level, but also the concerns that exist for us that may not exist towards our states that are in the north, especially as they might be with working with people who are immigrants, where in other states that's not going to happen or be as huge of a concern as it is for us. Other professional organizations are out there that you can join, like the ACA Insurance Trust Organization. What it does is promotes and administers quality insurance coverages for ACA or counselors who don't have insurance otherwise. For example, being a member of ACA, whether you're a professional counselor, professional school counselor, you can be provided insurance in the area so that should there become some sort of legal case that a client or a parent has done and it's not covered by school entities, that you still are protected on your own. The American Counseling Association Foundation encourages and supports counselors' well-being and the counselors and those counselors that serve. Chi Sigma Iota is actually the International Honor Society. UTPB has developed our own honor society that exists only at UTPB, but what I've done is included all of the pieces that are in the national program set, so that when we receive our accreditation, we'll simply submit our material and all of a sudden be able to call ourselves our national with Chi Sigma Iota. An accreditation agency is CACREP. It's the Council for the Accreditation of Counseling and Related Educational Programs. And what it does is it's an independent council that is supported by ACA that accredits institutions with graduate-level counselor preparation. It holds a high level of standards and imparts both rigorous and objective rules of establishing programs. So in order to be a CACREP equivalent or a CACREP accredited program, you must meet these strict and high standards. Our program right now is going to be undergoing CACREP accreditation. Right now, you are in a CACREP equivalent program, which means this program has everything that is required to become CACREP accredited. The only thing that we're waiting for is a third member, because you do have to have 3 full-time faculty members in order to be able to be considered for accreditation through CACREP. Council on Rehabilitative Educators was the core. We actually called it CORE. We had CORE and we had CACREP. The CORE organization accredits graduate programs that prepare rehabilitation counselors. What you'll find in our chapters that have preceded and coming across that, we will not talk about CORE so much because of the fact that in 2015, both CACREP and CORE merged and became this really wonderful, huge, and one and only type of organization, so that people would know specifically to be nationally licensed or certified, there would be a clear delineation of what that would take, both for people who want to become counselors accredited across the nation, as well as for counselor educators who want to prepare their students to have national accreditation, licensure, and certification. The National Board for Certified Counselors is a board. It's a voluntary nonprofit, non-governmental, independent corporation which advances professional counseling credentials. So for those of us who come through the UTPB program, you could actually earn your LPC or your certification as a school counselor and also become a nationally certified counselor through the National Board. Although with the CACREP designation, that won't necessarily be necessary in times to come. Professional development is a key component of being an effective counselor, as well as being a counselor bound in an ethical code that makes sure that we're not hurting clients and we're performing as we should. It helps the professional counselor maintain or increase the counseling knowledge. People are so complex, and we learn with time. You can't remember or learn every single thing that you can in a 60-hour program, because people change, the world changes, the context of political and socio and economical type influences change. So we're constantly learning on how to work with people in this ever-changing and diverse place. So continuing education and professional development is a must for professional counselors. Obtaining licenses and certification guarantees that professionals will need continuing education, professional development opportunities, because of license and certifying entities require it. Affordable continuing education opportunities are offered by ACA and its division in branches. So what happens here is that, let's say, for instance, every 2 years you have to renew your LPC through the state. To renew that, it will tell you specifically that you must have, not let your license lapse, that you have 24 hours of continuing education credits, and 6 of those hours must be in ethics. So our agencies that provide not only our certification as school counselors, but our licensing at the state level has a specific amount of hours of continuing education that you have to have. And in some cases, depending on whether you're a supervisor or have a different specialty, it will require that you have a certain number of hours in a specific area. Now, for those of us who became school counselors before the earth's crust hardened, don't have to continue to renew our certification. Fortunately, though, the schools often provide multiple opportunities for accreditation during work days or to go to conferences, etc., to continue our knowledge and growth as professionals, as well as the content that is occurring in the world that we may not know much about. I am telling you for certain that when I went through my program and graduated in the 1990s, we did not talk, there was no such thing as cyberbullying. And if there was the type of sex trafficking that we have now, it wasn't made available. Technology and phones, we didn't even have our own cell phones by then. So it's important to recognize how quickly the world can change, and we must adapt to it. The benefits of joining a professional counseling association is that you will get access to books, journals, listservs, newsletters, web pages, that all counselors are provided with the information on current issues and updates in the profession. Many organizations may even provide grants, scholarships, and even awards that can come through to help you seek other specializations, reward the work that you're doing in the profession even. Employment listings and assistings, there's a lot of the programs that, or divisions that you can become a part of, that when they send you a monthly magazine or a journal, in the back will have all of the employers who are looking for LPC counselors, school counselors, or even counseling professors. And the liability insurance is major important. You get about $1 million worth of coverage in regards just by simply joining these professions. And you can actually purchase more if your particular agency or the place you work requires it. Also, what I think is the most important is the professional identity. That we can come together and know that we all believe in this idea of who we are. But this said, there is an unfortunate consequence of having this professional identity. And the side effect of this identity is that affiliated associations have become a looser consortium of entities, which has in some cases led to a loosening of ties of bond between some of ACA and some of the divisions. For example, you'll often see on some of the listservs that you can get a part of where there are counselors. I'm part of one for counselor educators, so we've kind of go back and forth. You'll see some people who will get angry, and those people who are part of the LGBTIA type of divisions may start in with the people who come from more conservative or even the spiritual division of religious counseling. And although we're talking about the same thing from the outside, you can see that they're arguing about things that are not different, but could cause beliefs that there are differences simply by the name of the division or the language that is used. So not all division leaders see or desire the counseling profession to be a united one. And maybe the fact that we push against each other is because it will help us to grow. So pushing back doesn't always have to be a negative thing. Because of the pushback, I believe sometimes is where and why we've been able to develop into the organization and profession and with our identity that we currently have. What does national accreditation mean? National accreditation is pursued by a university or college, which in this case is UTPB, to demonstrate the compliance with high professional, educational, and or training standards developed by an independent professional review board. So, institutional accreditation involves a general review of operation and curricular practices at an entire university. So technically speaking, we have at UTPB are part of SACS, which is the Southern Association of Colleges and Universities. And that division comes to look at the practices that happened at UTPB and decide whether or not our university is running in such a way for it to be accredited university, because there are universities out there that aren't, and luckily we are. So we maintain and change what is necessary given by SACS. But we also have the specialty institutional accreditations. What happens is for our programs, both the school and the clinical counseling programs, we can apply to an outside accrediting agency like CACREP to show them that we have met the standards to become accredited at a national level for our particular program. And then to go even further, you have these specialized accreditations like CACREP that then breaks down even more, where we will both have both of our programs, the school counseling and the clinical side, both of them will be nationally accredited by CACREP, but not all of the schools have that. Even though there are schools in Texas that have both programs, not both of them are accredited. And We also are accredited by other agencies like Texas Education Agency. We must not only follow, and so I've developed the curriculum, and then those of us who teach have to show that we're meeting all the standards nationally, but also through the state so that people could apply for state licensure. And then also to meet the requirements by Texas Education Agency for school counselors, who then have additional standards. We put all those standards together and make sure that we are meeting and addressing all of them in every single one of our classes, so that you'll have exactly what you need when it's time for you to obtain your licensure or certification. It's not an easy process, but very worthwhile, and it's why it makes our program as strong as it is. When a state gives its approval, it's simply stating that the college or the university has met the minimum requirements for the statewide standards for all programs and degree granting institutions. It's that SACS piece. Many state accredit graduate school counseling programs in conjunction with national accreditation processes. It's always important, although when I was in school as a first-generation student, I would never even know that I should have been looking or making sure that I was going to a school that was accredited, that the program was. Luckily, it was fitting what was needed, and I remember the professor saying something about it, so I had stuck with it. It would be interesting what happened to very many programs that aren't accredited, and the problems that may cause students who didn't realize that was important. State professional certification and other credentials. There's credentialing in the counseling world occurs when professionals demonstrate they have met standards, education, knowledge, and experience, and these procedures can change from state to state. The certification for title restrictions are provided for those individuals within a given profession who may have met a higher standards than others within the same group. For example, you can actually take additional classes and then put time in working with families only to obtain your license as a marriage and family therapist. You can earn later on, go and find an institute and take classes and put time in to become a play therapist. So these are those additional type of certifications that you can obtain even during or after you graduate from a counseling program. With licensure, the process by which individual state legislatures regulate either the title, practice, or both of an occupational group. So the state of Texas provides limitations, opportunities, and standards that you have to meet. The Practice Act prohibits practice of counseling, the practice of professional counseling without first obtaining licensure. People who are practicing without a license can not only lose their job, but could be cited and held in contempt of breaking the law because they're practicing without something that is required by our state in order to be a counselor. Only those individuals who have successfully completed all state licensing requirements can call themselves licensed professional counselors, or even certified school counselors for that matter. And school counselors have the two additional requirements of the years of not only having a teaching certification, but having 2 years of teaching experience, so that they're made more aware of what happens on a school campus, something that is not automatically taught to a licensed professional counselor. State licensure are general requirements for the state or a master's degree from an accredited university. A certain number of semester hours for our programs, they can be as limited as 48, but the state now for the LPC has moved to 60. Specific coursework in specific areas, which tell me what classes that I have to make sure that are offered in our program so that you get the content you need. And between 2,000 to almost 4,500 hours of supervised experience, depending on the state. So for our state, you're supposed to have 300 hours in which you will obtain during your program to apply for your license as an intern, where then you will be required to have 3,000 hours of supervised post-internship hours. You actually find a working counselor who has a supervision license, and you meet with them once a week and pay them for your work with them to supervise you. So basically what some of that means is that you're working literally on their license until you get those hours. Right now, since we've changed to our CACREP program, you will actually graduate with 700 versus the 300 hours. What a great thing about this is you have that much practice before you graduate, and then because our state only requires 300, you can apply the 400 hours to your post-grad internship. So those hours definitely get used. And an additional requirement is that you pass a comprehensive examination. You are required to pass in the program a comprehensive examination so that we can see where your strengths or limitations might lie. This is very similar to the exam that you will take, the National Counselor exam, which is the NCE, after you graduate to get your intern license and then full license. For school counselors, it's the same. You have to take the comprehensive exam here at UTPB, a small practice one that are all required by Texas Education Agency, and we have to provide evidence that you've done that so that you can successfully obtain your certification as a school counselor. License portability, you'll hear this language used quite a bit during your time in the program. Portability refers to the ability of professionals to move their license status from state to state. Due to different state standards and procedures for licensure, currently the counseling profession does not have a portability agreement for the licensed professional counselors. But some states have begun addressing this issue by reaching reciprocity agreements with partner states. That is, states with similar licensing agreements agree to accept each other's licenses, so as long as they pay the appropriate fees at their new state to become a part of theirs. So what's happening now is this states are developing relationships with other states or neighboring, if that's what you will, so that we can take our license across state lines. Now, CACREP is going to be the huge intervention in this, and like I've said before, are starting to use the CACREP standards for the state standards. So not only will we in Texas be able to take our licensure to those states that we have reciprocity with, we'll also be able to take our licenses to the states that use the CACREP accreditation piece as their state accreditation competencies, their standards that people must meet. And there's pros and cons of licensure. The benefits, we're making sure that our clients are taken care of. There are some people out there who would claim to be some type of counselor who can hurt people. We need to make sure that they're taken care of, that there is a professional accountability and standards where they tell us specifically, this is what's okay, this is what's not. This is what you need to have to call yourself who you are. There's an increased accessibility of service for our clients and for ourselves. When you begin or sign up to be part of not only state licensure, but then these organizations and divisions, you begin getting through the mail, continuing education opportunities, conference information, local speakers that will come that prior to your participation you never even know were occurring. And with this type of licensure, you're able to use people's insurance, especially for those who can't pay out of pocket to receive services. Sometimes the drawbacks come from turf wars among mental health professionals. For example, sometimes you'll hear conflicts between people who have LPCs and people who have their licenses as marriage and family practitioners. With your LPC, you are educated to counsel families, counsel children, offer interventions regardless of what that is. But there will be some agencies who, let's say for instance, were started by someone who has their license as a marriage and family therapist or counselor, who will specifically only seek out other people who have that background in licensure. So will it sometimes get in the way of being where you want? Potentially. But don't ever forget that you do have what you need. It's these kinds of weird turf wars that make absolutely no sense to some of us that can cause some issues. An additional drawback is the financial cost associated with obtaining and maintaining licensure. Like I said, we renew our license every 2 years. So we have to make sure that we're getting our CEUs, our continuing education units, and a lot of times that's not free. If you're lucky enough to work for an organization that provides continuing education opportunities or provides monies to go to conferences, then you're safe. But for the people, for example, who have private practice, this is all out of pocket that must be done. When you submit all that to the state, you also have to pay a fee to renew your license. And for those of us who have multiple licenses, for example, I have the national certification, I have my school counseling certification, and my license. Those things sort of all happened at the same time. So if you can imagine, every time my license or certification, etc., is renewed, I have to pay for all of those things at one particular time. That's not the case for a lot of people who have gotten those at different times in their careers or different times in their educational career kind of opportunities. So that may not be an issue, but the money is irritating. Geographical limitations in that, if you think about it, we're about 2 hours away from any type of larger city. For us, our national or our state organization, is in Austin, which is quite a ways from here. And so being able to drop off your materials is not always an option. Luckily, they've switched that over to, fortunately, to electronic means since I went through. And the lack of true research evidence supporting the existence of these particular divisions. Is it really that important as a profession to have all these divisions, even though they're interesting and wonderful and provide the information we need? So those are some of the drawbacks, but the benefits far outweigh any drawbacks that I have ever experienced in over 20 years of this kind of work. And lastly, your national certification of counselors. Counselors who wish to become nationally certified voluntarily submit their credentials to determine if they have met preset specific standards required to become nationally certified counselors, which is basically a general practice certification. You can also become not only an NCC, but a National School Counselor certification. Requirements for the NCC include specific educational coursework, documented experience, endorsements by qualified professionals, like for your faculty who supervised you, and a passing score on the National Counselor exam. These are things that you are already going to have through our program, so you could do it. But what we're finding over time is that the NCC is not necessary for those programs that are CACREP equivalent and accredited. There's so much to know, and we'll continue to have conversations about what it means to be a part of an organization, what it means to get our licensure and how that process happens. The idea here is for it to be important to you that you know that these agencies are out here, that there are benefits to being a part of these organizations, and that to begin thinking of where this may lie for you in your profession as you get closer to the end of this program.